Good morning, I'm Jon Thelen. Today on Fish Ed, we're up on Upper Red Lake, and this is one of my favorite times of the year up here. Walleyes are active, and you can get them on a jig and minnow all day long, and I think that's some of the funnest fishing you can do. Stay right where you're at. It's going to be a good one. Right when I came out of that rock. Isn't that funny how that works? That fish, I got in that rock and I just gave it one little pop to get it out. And that fish must have been sitting right by it. And that walleye just scooped that jig up. You know, I think when it comes down to it, jigs are one of the most versatile things that you can fish anywhere. I'm fishing some pretty shallow water here today, and there's a lot of techniques that you could try, but I think the fact that I'm fishing a jig is what makes it so that I can catch walleyes like that one right there. We're gonna throw him in the well. He's gonna be the first walleye of the year in a fish fry for me on open water. But when these fish are up shallow like this is one of those deals where there's a few different ways you could catch them, but ultimately, I think jigs are the most effective, and here's why. I got the boat sitting right now in about 6 feet of water, and right up here, I mean, we're talking 3-4 feet of water, and it's all rocks. And if I take the boat right over the top of these fish, odds are I'm just gonna spook fish out, or I'm gonna struggle with my boat control to stay right where I wanna be, or I'm gonna be right over the top of them, and it's gonna make it really hard to catch fish. But with a light jig, I can just pitch in there, I can kind of work around, and then every now and then I'll go out the other side, I'll just let it go back, and I'll drag it a little bit. But that's what's so neat about jigs. I mean, you can pitch them, you can fish them vertical, you can drag them way back behind the boat, and no matter what situation you're fishing a jig in, it presents live bait so naturally. I mean, today we're just fishing a shiner on an 1/8 ounce Lindy live bait jig, and I'll tell you what, these fish, they're all stacked up right up there, and I know I'm going to be able to sit and catch them all day long because of the technique we're using. Fish swam back toward me. I actually kind of had to chase him by reeling back toward me. I felt him hit it right when I got out there. And all of a sudden that line was just slack. And that's one of the neat things about using a super line when you're fishing a jig, is the fact that you can feel everything and you can actually see what's happening in your rod tip. That's a great eye right there. So what I'm doing here today, this is actually a pretty simple concept, but it's, in some respects, it's really complicated too. Because what I'm doing is I'm pitching jigs and I'm pitching them up into rocks. And when you're throwing up into rocks, one of the things that you start finding out is there's a lot of snags up there, and you really got to figure out that right cadence and how you're going about doing what you're doing. And that's a great eye right there. We're gonna measure him up quick because we got some special regulations on the water we're fishing today. I'm actually gonna let that fish go. He's just a hair over 17, and we're gonna catch plenty of fish today. So let's put him back in the water, and then let me show you what I'm using. Let me explain to you why I'm using it, because it makes such a big, huge difference if you're using the right jig and the right setup in a situation like this. You'll just catch more fish. Get out of here, buddy. There we go. But you know, when I threw out there, like I was telling you, I mean, all of a sudden it was just bang. I felt that fish bite. And then all of a sudden everything went slack. And what that told me was fish was coming back at me. There was no way, the way he bit it, that he had let go of it. And that's one of the reasons I use this super line. And I just use a 10-pound super line. But then what I also do is I tie a 6-pound monofilament or fluorocarbon, like I'm using today, leader. And I like fluorocarbon when I'm pitching in rocks because it's just a little bit stronger, a little bit less abrasion, and it makes it so that you don't end up breaking off eventually quite as easy. but that little bit of line, especially in this shallow water, can make a huge difference because it makes it so the fish can't see it as easy. And then what we're using today is just an 1/8 ounce Lindy live bait jig. Now this jig is actually designed to fish in a lot of different ways, but one thing you'll notice is it's got a short shank hook on it. And the reason behind that is you don't use this jig with plastics. This is actually meant to fish live bait. And a good friend of mine, Jeff Sundin, developed this jig years and years ago, and we decided to put it into the Lindy lineup because it's just so effective. But what's great about this jig is you can just lip hook that minnow, and yet you're still so close to that head that it really looks like it's all one piece down there. There's not that separation that you get with a round ball jig. Now don't get me wrong, you could fish a round ball jig right here, but this is the perfect jig for this situation. Here's the other neat thing about this Lindy live bait jig. Because of its shape, because of that design, it actually slides through those rocks a lot easier. So when I'm pitching out there and I'm working this thing back and I get down in between a couple rocks, that shape, that angle just pulls through them a lot easier. So it makes it a really effective jig. So whether you're gonna drag them, whether you're gonna pitch them, even vertical jig, and this is just a dynamite jig, it's a Lindy live bait jig. And today it's an 1/8 ounce, that seems to be the ticket. There he is. Got him. Oh yeah, feels like a pretty decent fish. One of the things that I do too that I think makes a big difference is later in the year, I'm really gonna focus on fishing the windy sides of structures. But at this time of the year, it's amazing how these fish will just roam structures. They're not necessarily so intent on being on the windy side all the time. And I think part of that, oh yeah, it's another good eye. I think part of that is just the plain and simple fact that the bait fish isn't all balled up yet. The walleyes are just leaving those spawning areas and they're roaming all over. They don't need to school up yet. They're just moving around and finding spots where they can feed. And walleyes like that one right there, he fed, right? He came up and whacked it. But you can go out and you can pitch jigs around and do the stuff we've been doing today, and you can be pretty successful day in and day out. Just use a few of those tricks that we showed you. You can catch fish like that pretty consistently. I'm gonna throw that guy back. What a great way to wrap up our day today.